Okay, let's do one more serious one. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Emily.
And this is A Trial by Podcast.
I like that last one.
Fucking kill it. Okay, everybody, if you hear heavy pantsing in the background, it's Molly, who is Emily's dog. So don't be
separation
concerned.
Anxiety, so I was afraid she was going to start kicking the door.
Okay. So I came up with a true crime quiz for one of our friends who doesn't listen to true crime, and I was just telling Emily about it, and we're going to record it in case it's funny. So, Emily, a woman is dead. Who did it?
The husband.
Yes! Yes, dude, that's exactly what I wanted. Yes, dude, that is so funny. I was like, this is going to be the funniest question to ask Katie because she's going to be like, what?
She's
like, I'm not going to get
know.
it, but I was like, me and Emily will know the answer. Okay, what is double jeopardy?
Oh, I've heard this term before, too.
This is fun because I'm realizing you're not as obsessed with true crime as I am, which I think will make...
You just know all of the terms really well, and my memory is trash, so...
I think but it'll make it more fun for me. I like that you have a trash memory, because then if I tell you, like, cases you've already heard before, like, you won't
I will not know. I will. Yeah, you can tell me details, and I'll be like, what?
Okay, double jeopardy is when you try someone for the same crime twice.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
You can't do it, basically, is the point. So, Emily, who is fresh air for?
The living. No, the dead.
Ding, 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 dead people. Fresh air is for dead people. I think that's a morbid thing. I think that's from morbid.
That's right. That's the only reason I know that.
By the way, we'll just say this up front. Like, I don't know when we're going to share this. I don't know if it's going to be like episode 1 or if this is going to be a Patreon thing yet. But what I will say is just up front, I want to let everyone know that Ash and Elena from Morbid are our fucking heroes.
Idols.
Well, yeah, idols. We want to be like them.
We aspire to be like them.
And they are our vibe. We love them. And yeah, I guess we should just put that out there. So
they are the reason I am into true crime. They are the only true crime podcast that I personally listen to.
What I love about them that they do such a good job of, and that I feel like, I think we hope to do, is like they do a good job of knowing when it's okay to be lighthearted and when something is heavy-hearted.
Yeah.
And I feel like it makes them more, for me personally, like more interesting to listen to. And I think that's really important because the whole like purpose behind like doing all this true crime stuff is like these unsolved cases or like cases where like the police just absolutely fucked up or someone
LAPD can go suck a dick.
Yeah, fuck you, LAPD.
Fuck you, LAPD.
But like, or where justice hasn't been served or someone's still free, like that's the point of telling these stories, is to like keep that going. Or like when the police are doing corrupt things and they're planting evidence, like that stuff has like slowly been going away over the decades, and that's because the media has been highlighting it. So that's, to me, that's the purpose of retelling these stories, in podcasts, in articles, in TV shows, and whatever. Yes, there's an entertainment purpose because you can tell the story as many times as you want, but if no one reads it or listens to it or watches it, it doesn't matter. It's to keep the story alive, to like keep people like going after it. And so that's why I feel like it's important to, make it digestible and make it enjoyable in some way to like listen to these stories, but also like be respectful. Because there's also like on the other end, there's those true crime podcasts that I feel like sometimes they're fucking disrespectful. Because they're just fucking around. And then there's the opposite end of the spectrum where they're very, very serious. And, I think rightfully so. But for me, I feel like just personally, and this isn't for everybody, I'm sure like people might listen to ours and they're like, oh, not our vibe. And that's really fine. But I feel like for me, to appeal to people who are like me and Emily, that's like, we're somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, like respectful, but still able to have a good time about it. So
yeah.
Anyway, So yes, fresh air is for dead people. Shout out Morbid. Sorry for the tangent.
If you sleep with your windows open, don't do that.
Yes.
Close your windows.
Close your
please.
windows. Fresh air is for dead people. I hope that's not from someone else that I'm like, but I'm pretty sure that's
what I
thing.
remember it from.
I'm pretty sure they even have like t-shirts that say it or something. But okay, Emily, today we're going to talk about the murders of the Eastburn family. Now, I wanted to give a little bit of note on sources. So I did use a handful of sources for this episode, some articles. I watched some videos. I listened to some podcasts. But I wanted to note that there was one source that I found particularly helpful, which was an article that was published in the New Yorker. It's titled 3 Trials for Murder, and it was written by Nicholas Schmidl. But it's a fantastic article. You're going to hear me like reference to it a handful of times throughout this, but he interviewed a lot of the people in this story, and it's a very well written story, and I totally recommend going to the New Yorker's like website and reading it. It's really good. So Gary and Katie Eastburn met at a softball game for singles in 1974. Gary said that meeting Katie was, quote, like somebody hit me between the eyes with a ball-peen hammer. I was madly in love with her, end quote. By 1975, they were married. By 1978, Katie was pregnant with the first of their 3 daughters. Gary was in the Air Force, so in 1983, the family had to move to Pope Air Force Base in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where Gary served as the chief of air traffic control. It was a change, but the family seemed to be relatively settled by 1985, despite Gary spending a lot of time out of town for work. You see, Gary had been offered a job in England to serve as a liaison to the Royal Air Force, so he had to complete a 3-month training before the family moved. Now, in the spring of '85, Gary was attending his training in Montgomery, Alabama, and it was tough being away from his family, but he and Katie put in the effort to stay close in contact. They wrote letters to each other and even had a scheduled weekly call every Thursday night in case they missed each other throughout the week. So this Thursday night, Gary's waiting for Katie's call is scheduled, and he waits, but the phone never rings. So eventually, Gary just decides to call her, but she doesn't pick up. He keeps trying to reach her that weekend, Friday, Saturday, but call after call after call just goes unanswered. So when he still hasn't heard from Katie by Saturday evening, he starts to get extremely worried. He decides to call a friend in Fayetteville and ask him to stop by the house to check on the girls, which he does. But when he knocked on the door, no one answers. Not knowing what to do, the friend stopped by the next door neighbor's house, and this is around 11 p.m., to ask if the neighbor, who is Bob Seefeld, had seen Katie or her 3 young daughters recently, or if he noticed anything out of the ordinary, anything like that. But Bob told the guy, no, everything seemed normal, haven't noticed anything normal, and he just went back to bed. Now, the next day, which was actually...
So, wait. Did he say he hasn't seen them at all? Or he just said nothing seemed out of the ordinary?
He was just like, no, I haven't noticed anything weird, basically.
Okay.
But he said that he did say, where I read somewhere, after the guy left, and he was kind of, thinking about it that night, and the next morning, he was like, I don't know the last time I saw them, because it's not like they were close friends or they were neighborly,
it's not like
but
they hung out every day.
Right. So he was like, yeah, I guess we haven't seen her in a few days, but again, he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. So for him,
he wasn't looking for it.
He wasn't looking for it. So it didn't stick out to them that he hadn't seen them in a few days.
Okay.
But the next day, which was actually Mother's Day, it was Sunday, May 12th. Bob had to go into work for a half day, and then he got home from work just after noon, around 12:30. So this is when he noticed that there were 3 newspapers lying in the Eastburns' driveway. And this was unusual for Katie. She always collected the paper from the drive every morning. And then, this really triggered him to, think more about it. He's like, I don't know when the last time I saw them was. And the more he thought about it, he's like, that is kind of weird, because normally he sees the girls playing outside in the backyard almost every day. And he's
they're young, they're outside.
Now that he's thinking about it, he's like, I haven't seen them in a few days. So he collects all the newspapers from the end of the driveway and walks them up to the front porch. And he's like, I need to just knock on the door and like check on them, see if everything's okay. Because Katie's car is in the driveway and it has been there. And he's like, it hasn't moved in a while either. Yeah. So he's like, they must be home. And he had thought for like a minute, maybe they went out of town for Mother's Day or like to go visit Gary. But then why was the friend checking on them saying that Gary called? Yeah. So he goes to check on them. He walks up to the front door and he rings the doorbell a few times and no one answers. But he does hear like a weird noise coming from the house. And he's like, I think it's the baby. I think the baby is crying. So the baby is Jana. She's 22 months old. She's the youngest of the 3 children. And he's like, I swear I can hear her crying, but it's so faint. He's like, I don't know for sure if it's crying, but he hears nothing else in the house. It doesn't sound like any commotion. It doesn't sound like anyone's going to get the baby crying or moving around in the house. Something. So he goes back over to his house to get his wife and like, he's like, hey, come listen to this. Like, tell me if you hear the baby crying. And she comes over and she does. She's like, that is definitely the baby crying. And so his wife like runs home, calls the police, and then an officer arrives like about 15 minutes later. But by the time the officer arrives, the baby's not crying anymore. So, and like in this interview that I watched with Bob, he basically says it kind of seemed like the officer was like, didn't really believe him, or he's like, what do you want me to do? Like the doors are locked of this house.
Now it's not, the mom probably got her.
Yeah. And like the doors are locked. Like, you know, I can't just break into this house. Like that's not protocol. So Bob is like, imploring the officer, like,
yeah, like do a welfare check, make sure they answer the door, do something, make sure there's someone in there.
Right. And he's like, look, it's not, if it's just a quiet house and the doors are locked and you have no reason to think something's wrong, I get it. But there's a baby crying inside and no one will come to the door. Something is wrong. We can't just leave the baby in there.
Exactly. That plus Gary not being able to get a hold of them for 3 days, plus the newspaper in the driveway, like red flags left and right.
Like, exactly. So finally the officer like gets approval from the sergeant to like basically not follow protocol and go in and get the baby. Yeah. So they go around to the side of the house outside the window that is like for Jana's nursery, and they can like, now they hear the baby again. So the officer like opens the window because all of the windows, like the latches were open, so you can easily get into this house. He cuts the screen out of the window and goes inside, and he immediately grabs Jana, passes her to Bob through the window. Now, Jana was extremely disheveled looking. She was dehydrated. She looked emaciated. She was gaunt. She was pale, and she was covered in her own soil, and it seemed like she had been sitting in it for days. The doctors who tended to her at the hospital later told investigators that she was just hours away from death when she was found. So now the officer who went inside to get Jana later said that the moment he entered the house, the first thing he noticed was a rancid odor, which he knew, of course, was the smell of decomposition. So he immediately calls in the homicide unit. So Detective Robert Biddle and Detective Jack Watts, those are kind of like our 2 main boys on this case, okay?
Biddle and Watts. All right, let's go.
Biddle and Watts. Isn't that like, they should have a TV show.
Like Simon and Garfunkel, you know?
Biddle and Watts, yes. They sound like a dynamic duo for sure.
Absolutely.
So they come from the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department and arrived on the scene just after 1 p.m. on Sunday. They entered the house through the garage, and when they walk in, it was very evident to them that the bodies had been there for some time. All of the windows in the house were closed, and it had been warm spring days that weekend. So Biddle...
The smell.
Yeah.
I could only imagine.
Biddle later tells reporters from the New Yorker article that I was mentioning, quote, death has a smell, its own aroma. I'll never forget the smell in there, end quote.
Oh, everyone says that. Everyone you talk to, I thankfully have never smelled death.
Me neither.
Thankfully.
I hope I never do.
Everyone I have ever heard that has all of the true crime podcasts I listen to, they all say that there is a undeniable smell, and it's not anywhere close to rotting food. You can never tell it apart from anything else.
Yeah, I hope I never ever have to smell it.
Same.
So the detectives started in the living room where they found a pair of women's jeans, 2 buttons that looked like they had been ripped from a blouse, and a pair of women's underwear that looked like they had been torn or cut off. Now, in the master bedroom, they found the bodies of 32-year-old Katie Eastburn and 3-year-old Erin Eastburn lying on the floor on opposite sides of the bed. Erin's face had been covered by a pillow, and when they removed it, they found that she had been bludgeoned in the chest and the back, and her throat had been cut so deeply that she was almost decapitated.
Oh my God.
A 3-year-old.
That's insane.
A 3-year-old. Now, Katie was found naked from the waist down. Her bra was pulled up to her neck. Her autopsy later showed that she was stabbed 15 times in the chest and was presumed to have been raped based on the fact that semen was found inside her, and she didn't have any pants on, and her bra was pulled up, okay?
God, the amount of rage you have to slit a 3-year-old child's throat and stab someone 15 times, let alone the amount of strength and endurance you have to do that, I feel like.
Yeah.
Oh my
15,
God.
like, you're just going through bone, like when you're stabbing someone in the chest. And he didn't stop there. In the girls' bedroom, they found the body of 5-year-old Kara Eastburn. And detectives suspect that she was likely trying to hide from the killer as she was wrapped up in a Star Wars blanket, like wrapped around her back, like she was hugging it. And then she had been repeatedly stabbed in the chest.
Jesus.
So it's just like this little girl is just trying to hide from you. Like, I don't know.
That's insane. But why leave the baby? You know, he could.
Well, that's
he can
what
do that to a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 32-year-old woman, but not the.
So that comes up later. Like, people have stuff to say about that. And even I watched this. So Jana did an interview with 2020, and she says, she's like, this is like bothered me my entire life. Like, why didn't he kill me?
Yeah.
And some people suspect, based on some stuff Jana says later, like right after the murders, that like maybe the other girls told her to hide. So the guy didn't know that she was in the house. But the other thing people say is, well, if sexually assaulting Katie was the motive, Katie's the target, maybe he didn't really even like want to kill the girls, but he killed them so that they couldn't like identify them.
Yeah.
And he was thinking like, okay, the baby's too young to identify me. I'm not going to kill the baby.
How old was she?
22 months. So she's almost 2 years old.
So she could walk and everything.
I think, yeah, 20. Yeah. I think she could talk a little bit because they talk later about some stuff she says. So Detective Watts was tasked with notifying Gary of the deaths. So he called Gary in Alabama and told him only that there had been a death in the family and that he needed to come home immediately. And Gary pressed him for more information, like who's dead, what happened, like what's going on. But Watts refused him, like just refused to give him any more information. But I mean, Gary knows, like he has not talked to his wife since the previous Thursday now and can't get a hold of her. So he knows something's wrong. Yeah. So Gary and another officer, like someone he works with, they fly together to Fayetteville and they head straight to the police station where Watts informed him that his wife and his 2 oldest daughters had been brutally murdered. And on top of that, his youngest daughter, Jana, was in the hospital extremely malnourished. It was going to take some time to re-nourish her, but it soon became evident that her mental wounds would take more time to heal than the physical ones.
Oh, yeah. Could you imagine, though? He has no idea what happened. He's like, oh, well, maybe they just, went to a friend's house for a few days and didn't tell me. Because they didn't give him any information. They were just like, come here so we can talk about this. And he, like, could you imagine the flight there? Like,
well, and also you would think, my mind would be, because he just said, there's a death in the family, you need to come home now.
Right.
I would think, I can't get a hold of my wife. My wife died in a car accident.
Right.
Or my wife is in the hospital in a, they said death. But I don't think you would
Your mind doesn't go there.
Your mind is going to the worst case scenario it can come up with. And I don't think your mind would even come up with the idea that your wife and 2 of your 3 daughters are all dead. I don't think your mind would go there. You would assume it was your wife because
they said a death,
and you haven't been able to get a hold of her. Obviously, if it was one of your daughters or like something, your wife is going to call you and tell you. But I can't even imagine. So for a long period of time, the almost 2-year-old Jana was completely silent after this. She would not talk to anybody.
I don't blame her.
Now, when she finally started speaking again, she was interviewed by a child psychologist who was basically just attempting to find out if she saw anything that could be useful to the investigation or like lead them to the killer. But when they asked her about her mom, all she would say is stuff like, "Mommy's not here right now," or "Mommy's at the store." And they showed her a picture of her mom and she just kissed the photo and she said, "That's Mommy."
That breaks my heart.
I know. And then they're trying to ask her like about the house and stuff a little bit. And when they show her a picture of the house, she just immediately becomes terrified. She starts crying and she's telling the psychologist they need to run. They need to hide from the bad man or hide from the burglar. And she would like run across the room trying to like hide under furniture and stuff. And so that's kind of why they thought that maybe like one of the other girls came in while Katie was being attacked and like came in and told the baby to like hide from the bad man or something.
She was the only one that got away and could hide in a good spot.
Right.
Obviously. The other one, what was her name?
So Kara's the oldest, and then Erin's the 3-year-old. So Kara was 5, and Erin was 3.
Hiding, though, right?
Kara was the one that was found hiding, and Erin was the one found in the master bedroom with her mom.
Okay.
So, like, they think, because Kara did look like she had the blanket wrapped around her, they think maybe she was hiding. So maybe it's like, whatever was happening to Katie and Erin, like Kara ran in, told Jana to hide, and then she went to try and hide herself. But
the amount of terror that just gives me chills thinking like
and I'm just a little baby. Like imagine happening to you right now, but like a little baby, dude.
Right.
Little
Even
5-year-olds and 3-year-olds.
It's like she was old enough to know what was going on, I feel like. And like that's so terrifying. She's going to hide and just wrapped herself in a blanket because that's the safest place she knew where to go. It's like,
yeah. So despite delivering this earth-shattering news to Gary that day, the detectives had no time to waste. They immediately started questioning Gary about he and Katie's activities leading up to the murder. Gary explained that from what he knew, it was just a normal week for them. That is, until the detectives mentioned that the family dog was not in the home.
Dog?
Yeah, her name is Dixie.
Oh, Dixie.
Don't worry, Dixie's okay.
Oh, thank God.
So, since the family planned on moving to England later that year for Gary's job, they decided that they needed to find a new home for Dixie. So the UK requires like an extensive quarantine process for animals, and they just like did not think that Dixie would handle it well. Like they didn't want to put her through that. So they're like, we got to find someone to take her and like give her a good home. And Katie had placed an ad in the paper, and I'm going to try and say the name of this. It is the Beeline Grab Brag, like Fort Bragg. Beeline Grab Brag. That's what I kept saying. I kept saying bag.
Grab bag.
Hard to say, but yeah, not the best for marketing, but that's just me. So this was a newspaper that was distributed to the military community living around Pope Air Force Base and Fort Bragg, which are like right next to each other. Mm-hmm. So when the detectives mentioned the dog, Gary remembered that, Katie had said someone replied to the ad and a nice man had come and gotten the dog. Now she said she let him know about this in a letter. It wasn't on the phone. So he didn't know any other details. It was like, I think one of the last letters that Katie sent him. She just said a nice man came and got the dog. So they don't really know when, but she had just taken out the ad earlier that week. So they know it was very recent. Now, Gary didn't know the name of the man or anything else about him. So Biddle and Watts look into it. They're able to find the newspaper ad that she had taken out. And at this point, the mystery dog adopter is at the top of their list for people to identify and interview. But right now, they still had this crime scene to investigate. So after finishing with Gary, Biddle and Watts returned to the Eastburn house, where crime scene technicians had already been at work for hours. They had already collected fingerprints and hair. They sprayed luminol on the walls, which did reveal blood smears in the master bathroom, almost like the killer was trying to clean it up.
Oh, shit.
Now, they also found, and we'll discuss this later on, there was a drop of blood on a towel in the bathroom that did not match the Eastburn's blood types. So they took that for evidence as well.
Did they find any, like, indication of her, like, in like, a struggle? Like, anything under her nails or anything like that? Like,
okay, this is a good question. And again, I'm letting you know this is later in the story because I know by the time I get to it, I'm going to forget and I'm going to start the sentence and people are going to be like, we already knew that, Kelsey. But so later on, I do mention this is brought up very briefly in the reports I could find that they had found like something under the fingernails of Katie and I believe it was Kara. And I don't want to say too much about it. But it's weird that it's not more talked about. And I think maybe it's just because this is all before like DNA.
yeah.
So like they couldn't really do much like if it was like skin cells or something under their nails. It's the 80s. This is 1985.
Oh.
Yeah. But so I don't know. It's odd because I didn't see it. I only saw that reported in a few places. And like when I was trying to look up more information about it, I couldn't find anything else. So that's one of the things where I'm like, okay, if I only see it one place, is this true?
How credible it is.
But I thought it was worth mentioning. So now after speaking with the neighbors, investigators believe that the murders had taken place late Thursday night / early Friday morning because Katie was last seen alive on Thursday and the papers in the driveway went all the way back to Friday morning. So the papers in the driveway were Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay. Now, after the crime scene technicians were finished, they also had Gary walk through the house to look for any missing items. So together, he and the investigators determined that an envelope of cash, and I have no idea how much cash was in there. I tried to look everywhere. I cannot find it. But an envelope of cash, Katie's like ATM debit card, and a piece of paper that had Katie's ATM pin on it were all missing. Now, this is confusing to me because I don't know why, like, she had her pin written down. Maybe it was, like, a new card. And I also, like, I don't know how Gary knew that she just happened to have a piece of paper with the pin on it. But, like, maybe it was just something that they kept somewhere as for, like, a record, like, in a drawer or something, and it was missing. I couldn't find any information on it. Now, just after midnight, the day that the bodies were discovered, a young man named Patrick Cohn approached investigators outside of the Eastburn home saying that, you know, he had heard what happened and he has some information that might be useful to them. So Cohn was a janitor and he often worked like really early shifts. He also didn't have a car, so he would walk to work early in the morning. And he had a shift that Friday morning that started at dawn. So he walked to work. And on his walk to work, he passes the Eastburn house. They live on Summerhill Road, and he walks down that road.
So he passes it every day.
Right. He tells Biddle that on Friday morning around 3:30 a.m., he saw a tall white man leaving the Eastburn's driveway carrying what he thought was either a garbage bag or maybe a backpack like over his shoulder. He said the man was wearing jeans, a knit beanie, and a black members-only jacket. Now, if you're like me, which I think you are, you're probably wondering what the fuck a members-only jacket is. Or do you know?
No, members only. I'm assuming it's probably like a varsity jacket or
That's
something?
what I thought. Okay, so I had heard this case like long before I started researching it. Mm-hmm. And the whole time I'm picturing like a varsity jacket.
Yeah.
But I'm like, all right, now I'm telling the story. I should look this up and confirm. So it's not. So Members Only was actually a brand that gained popularity in the 80s. They got really popular after they shifted from like celebrity endorsed style advertising to using they were advertising via public service announcements on topics like the anti-drug movement and the importance of voting. Now, Interestingly, they became really popular among the American mafia through the 80s and 90s, which I think was probably like, I don't know this for sure. I didn't read this anywhere, but I'm just inferring like they probably were like, oh, anti-drug movement jackets. We're going to like the mafia is going to wear those.
Yeah. I just Googled them and they kind of just look like bomber jackets.
That's what, okay.
Like a It's like a mix between a bomber jacket and a sports coat, I guess.
Yes,
like
and they have this really like thin collar that has like a button on the front, that like a snap button on the collar. And the ones that I saw, like there's a pocket on the front chest that just looks like a line, like it doesn't have the whole outline like around the pocket, like it's sewn on the inside basically. Yeah. And there's a tag that says members only. So because I was wondering when I'm looking at, before I looked it up, I'm like, how identifiable is this jacket? Like, could he have gotten it wrong? But to me, it looks like kind of the 80s equivalent of like a North Face. Like if I saw I'm like, someone was wearing a North Face puffer jacket, like I would know what you're talking about. Exactly. So anyway, Cohn also said that like, as the man was walking past him at the bottom of the driveway, he looked at Cohn and said something along the lines of, oh, like getting an early start this morning or leaving a little early this morning. Which to me is just like, why are you explaining?
Talk to him? Oh
yeah, he passed. The guy is coming down the driveway as Cohn is like walking past the house. So he sees the guy coming down the driveway and he's like kind of, and if you look at pictures or video of the Eastburn house, they have a really long driveway. Like it's not like a quarter mile where like you can barely see the house from the road, but it's like, I would say 2 or 3 times the length of a normal driveway, and their house is kind of like up on a slope. So it's
like it took him a while to
right. So like there's no way like if Cohn was walking by and he passed him as the guy's walking onto the sidewalk, like he probably wasn't up by the house when Cohn first saw him. Like he was probably like near the end of the driveway. So you don't know exactly what he's doing. But
so does Cohn know the family though, or was he?
No, he doesn't know them. He lives like in the area, but he's just
like living here. Like he thinks this guy.
Yeah, like you wouldn't even think that deeply about it. You're just like, this guy's going to work early or something.
What's up? Yeah.
Right. So as like Cohn's walking one way and the guy passes him and walks in the opposite direction, like down the street. So Cohn keeps walking, but he hears a car start and he just like turns around briefly. You know what I mean? Just naturally, you're like, what is that? And he sees the man drive away in a white Chevette, which is like a kind of like a little white Chevy sports car looking thing. Now, based on the timing, the man that he saw is their number one. They're like, that's the he saw absolutely. The killer because it was 3:30 in the morning. They think they were killed Thursday night. It's 3:30 in the morning, Friday morning. So they immediately like set him up with a sketch artist and get a composite sketch made. Now, that Wednesday, just 3 days after the discovery of the bodies, a 27-year-old man, he's an Army sergeant named Tim Hennis, was watching the news with his wife, Angela, when the sketch appears on the TV screen. The murders had been all over the news for days at that point, but the reporters now add that police are looking for the man in the sketch, who they believe drives a white Chevette. They also add that they are looking for another man that had possibly picked up the English setter from Summerhill Road the week before. So this is a little bit confusing because the way it's reported, I can't figure out if the news reports were saying, hey, we're looking for 2 different men that might have information. We're looking for the sketch guy driving the white Chevette, and we're looking for this guy, like someone who picked up the dog.
Nice man that picked up the dog, yeah.
I don't know if they're presenting it like that or if they're presenting it saying this is one person.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I do know that the way they're presenting it is not like these guys are suspects or this guy was seen leaving their house at 3:30 a.m.
Yeah,
they're saying, we think this guy, if you know him, like we think he has information, we want him to come forward about both of them. So they're not like presenting him as like this is a suspect. It's just like we think that you may have information or you may have been one of the last people to see her.
Like, let's just ask you a couple questions, dude.
So as Tim and his wife are sitting there watching this, Angela, his wife, looks over at him and she says, that's you. That's you. Not only did the sketch look just like Tim, but he also drove a white Chevette, and he had indeed been the one to pick up the English setter, Dixie, the week prior, after he and Angela had seen the ad in the paper.
Oh, shit.
So it is one person.
They're the same person.
They're the same person.
So that means that he was there more than once, right? Because there was somebody that picked up the dog the week before, and then she had she was able to write a letter Although, was the letter from her? Was it handwritten? Do we know?
The letter was from her. It was handwritten. It was from her.
Well, then, yeah, like, so he had to have been there twice.
So, yes, if what Cone is saying is true, yes, and that's what the police are thinking, or they do think. So, okay, we're gonna get there. That is a really good. That is a big, like, contentious point.
Could you imagine seeing your husband on the TV?
This is the thing is
to a T.
This is the thing is, she thinks, and she hasn't said this. This is what I'm inferring. She thinks they're watching the TV, and she had picked up, or he had gotten the dog from the lady. So she's thinking, oh, like, so a neighbor saw him going to get the dog, and they don't know who he is because we don't know this. It's not like we're friends. They're saying, oh, well, I saw a stranger there pick up the dog. Yeah. And he was in this car, and this is what he looks like. So she just thinks, oh, this is like a misunderstanding. Like, they don't know he was there to, like, get the dog. Mm-hmm. So we need to come forward. And so that's
and she doesn't know any of the details. Like, she didn't know that this guy saw him with a bag or when.
Right. She doesn't know that and he doesn't, they're not saying that on the news.
Yeah.
So Hennis later says, like, to a reporter, quote, "My wife and I were shocked. It was the first time we realized that the lady who had been murdered was the one that I had picked the dog up from."
Oh my God.
Angela basically is like, we have to go to the police station. Like, we need to, like, come forward or whatever. Yeah. Just in case they could help with any information or whatever. So him and Angela.
Yeah. Like, what if you're the last person that saw her alive?
Right. And if you don't come forward, that's suspicious. Like, if you're the one who took the dog. So I mean,
she put two and two together that looked like him, and he drove the same car. So,
and I'm about to show you a picture. It does fucking look like him. The sketch sucks, but somehow it still looks like him. Oh. So Tim and Angela get the car ready. They have a newborn daughter, so they put the newborn baby Christina in the car, and they head straight to the Fayetteville police station. Now, Detective Watts happened to be at the station when Tim and Angela walk in, and before he even knew what they were there for, he was like, the sketch just walked in. That was his first thought, is like, this is the man from the sketch. So I'm going to show Emily the photo. I'm going to try and describe it for you guys. So I've got a picture of Tim Hennis. Sorry if you hear me moving my laptop. So we got a picture of Tim Hennis, who is like a tall, blonde guy. I think he's like 6'5". Not that it matters in this photo, but he's a good-looking guy, right? He's a good-looking guy.
He's the average Joe. Like, he's blonde hair, stash.
He's got kind of this wider nose. He's got this thin little mustache, kind of like a really structured, like, jaw. Yeah. Wider face. Sorry, you probably hear little Miss Molly over there shaking it out. But in the sketch in my mind, like, does look just like him.
Oh, yeah.
The sketch has a hat on because the guy was wearing a hat.
I mean, if that guy walked into a police station after I looked at that sketch, I would say the same thing.
Exactly.
I'm like, that is that guy.
So he's got the same mustache. He's got the same, like, wide nose.
The eyebrows. I feel like he has, like, hooded eyes, too. Like, he doesn't have his eyes are, like, kind of, like, set back. Yeah, like, he has, like, a prominent brow bone. Yeah.
But the only difference I see is that, like, Tim Hennis has this, like, kind of wide-ish face. And in the sketch, his face looks, like, very thin.
Yeah, very narrow and longer.
Yeah. But other than that, like, the actual face, if you ignore the shape of the head, it's, like, it looks just like
him.
The
T-zone is where I'm, like, the mouth and the nose are the most... Those look just like it.
It's crazy to me. So... Once they learn that, like, Hennis was indeed the man that had picked up the dog and that he drove a white Chevette and looked just like the guy that Patrick Cone had seen the other night, they are like...
This is our guy. We got him.
Yeah. They're kind of thinking this is their fucking
guy. That's scary when you walk into a police station and they're like, hey, you look just like that fucking sketch that we just...
And you drive the same car.
Yeah.
And
That's... So everything's coming together, not in a good way for him.
Basically, they sit him down and they demand a detailed account of, like, his visit to the Eastburn house, getting the dog, what happened, a timeline, everything. So he tells them that he arrived at the Eastburn's house a little before 9 p.m. on Tuesday night to meet the dog. He says he immediately liked Dixie, but he wanted to make sure that she got along with his other dog before agreeing to keep her. He tells them that he asked Katie, like, can I take her home for a few days? Just make sure they get along. Like, if they don't get along, I'll bring her back. And if they do, like, we want to keep her. And Katie agrees. So according to Hennis, he left the home and never returned. But he says that Katie called him Thursday evening to ask how it was going and if he wanted to keep her. Allegedly, he told her the dogs got along great. We want to keep her. And he swears after that phone call, he never saw or spoke with Katie again.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, I mean, when did she call him Thursday night? Do we know that? Because Gary tried to call her Thursday night and she didn't answer.
Right. I can't find a time, but I do know it was like early in the evening Thursday. Like,
Okay.
I'm picturing this just based off on what I was reading. I'm picturing like 3 or 4 p.m., maybe even 5. But it didn't seem like it was like nighttime. Like, she called him like very late afternoon or very early evening, just based on what he does after. Because he says that after he talked to Katie on the phone, he drove Angela and the baby to her parents' house where they stayed the night that night. And then
All 3 of them stayed the night there.
No, just Angela and the baby.
Oh.
He dropped them off. He got gas and went straight home and was home alone the rest of the night.
Interesting.
So
did he say why they stayed the night there?
I think just to like visit, like it sounded like it was a little bit of a far drive.
So they're just going to visit, say hey, and then they'll come home in the morning.
Right. So moral of the story is he's at home alone Thursday night.
So he has no alibi.
He has no alibi. And, you know, he was a little impatient during this questioning, we'll call it, really interrogation. It went on for 7 hours. So I don't know, like, who wouldn't
wow.
be? I would be like,
that's exhausting.
You know, if I didn't do anything, I'd be like, fucking dude, this is not how I thought my day was going to go.
Yeah.
But he did seem to be relatively cooperative. Like, he was a little annoyed, but he's answering the questions. And he even gave samples of his blood, saliva, and hair, as well as finger and palm prints. Day one, gave it to the police.
Willingly. Okay.
So before they let him leave, like while he was there, they call in Patrick Cohn to look at a photo lineup. They set his photo next to 5 others of different men with blonde hair and mustaches, and they asked Cohn if any of the photos were the man that he saw in the Eastburns' driveway that night. Cohn reviewed the photos and told them, number 5 has his nose, but it's definitely number 2. And number 2 was indeed Tim Hennis. Now, because they didn't have a warrant, they had to let Hennis leave. So he goes home, but later that night, with a warrant in hand, a team of officers knock on his front door. He opens the door, and some agents just walk directly past him into the house to search the home, while the other officers handcuff him. So just days after the bodies were found, Hennis was officially under arrest for 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of sexual assault.
What were they looking for? Did they have something that they...
I think they,
Just, like,
the
clothing,
ATM
anything?
card the ATM card, anything, but bloody clothes, whatever they could find. So Hennis's father, who was a retired IBM executive, immediately hired a team of prominent lawyers to defend his son, which seemed to be becoming a more difficult job the more time went on and investigators looked into Tim. So the first thing they do is look into his alibi or lack thereof, really. He says he dropped off Angela and the baby, got gas, went straight home, stayed home all night by himself. This was pretty quickly found to be a lie. According to one of Hennis's ex-girlfriends, Nancy Macer, he showed up at her house that night unannounced.
he cheating.
Unannounced. Just shows
unannounced?
up. Unannounced.
So she didn't know he was coming. Okay.
No, she did not know he was coming. They did keep in touch from time to time, it was said.
But not hanging out,
I
just
don't
show
know.
up at my place.
I don't know. It seemed like no. It seemed like they just kind of kept in touch. Mm-hmm. But she definitely was not fucking having it.
Yeah, she's like, I don't talk to him.
He just shows up, and because he knew, because they kept in touch, he knew that her husband was
she's married too? Ooh.
Yes. And her husband was deployed in Germany at the time. So she was home alone. And he
knew this.
And he's looking to bump some uglies for sure, obviously. But Nancy's not having it. Basically he starts, trying to make his little moves. And she's like, how's your wife? How's your wife, Tim?
Yeah, she's like, why are you here? I have a husband. I'm not having this.
Yeah, how's your wife, dude?
like-
And I'm like, hell yeah,
What are
Nancy.
you doing here?
So Tim responds, oh, she left me. Obviously not true. Not
Oh
true. They
my
just had a
God.
baby. He has a newborn daughter.
Let me just go drop off my wife and daughter at their parents so I can go hit up my ex for a little bump and grind late in the night for a little quick action. What? And then lie
Without
about
being
it.
invited or like even confirming that she wanted me, like
Yeah, what is that
just
about?
unannounced.
He's just like, let me go try my luck here.
So exactly. So based on this, Watts and Biddle begin to think that this absolutely savage denial from Nancy had Tim looking elsewhere for some physical affection, and that maybe this led him back to the home of a beautiful woman he had recently met, Katie Eastburn. Because if you look at pictures of her, she's very beautiful. Like, and the detectives also learned that Tim had an interesting weekend that weekend. So on Friday, the day after the murders, Tim had dropped off some dry cleaning. Well, not really some dry cleaning. It was just one article of clothing, a black members only jacket.
Oh, shit.
Now, according to his neighbors, Tim also had a nice little bonfire on Saturday. A bonfire with a twist, really, because instead of using a fire pit and having friends over, Tim opted for a 55-gallon barrel by himself for the fire. Neighbors reported that the fire lasted at least 5 hours.
Pyrotechnic going on there.
At least 5 hours, with the flames reaching to like the height of the roof of the house. It's a one-story house, but still. And they saw Tim stoking it and pouring lighter fluid on it for hours to keep it going. And yes, the neighbors did confirm that this was unusual. They had never seen him burn anything in the backyard before.
I mean, yeah, but your mind doesn't go to, oh, he's burning clothes that he just has to destroy
Right, you're just
evidence.
like, that's weird. What a weird dude.
Yeah, like, okay, well, he's playing with fire. He's fucking around and finding out.
Also, whenever I hear about this in cases, I'm like, where are people getting these barrels? Like, did he just... Because they don't say anything about him buying this barrel or like going to get it or
like, where do
anything.
you
I'm
just
like,
get a barrel
did he
of
just have
kerosene?
this barrel? Like, and why? Like, what is this? What are these I think normally sometimes they call them oil drums. Like they're for oil. I'm like, where did you get this?
Yeah, where do you just find this? They don't sell those at Home Depot.
Yeah, maybe it's like an old, like maybe that was just normal in the 80s. You just had that in your garage or something. I don't know.
Tractor?
Maybe. I don't know. Now, investigators also learned that Katie's debit card had been used twice after her death. So it was used at 10:54 p.m. Saturday night and at 8:56 a.m. Sunday morning at an ATM. I could not find if it was the same ATM both times. I don't know. But both times, the maximum of $150 was withdrawn. So a total of $300. Interestingly, Hennis's rent just happened to be $310, and he was late on rent that month, but miraculously was able to pay it Monday morning. So when detectives look into his background, they found that he also had a history of financial problems and 3 prior convictions for writing bad checks. But
Things aren't looking good for you, buddy.
they are not. They are not.
Pretty dim.
But still, this wasn't enough for detectives. You know, just it could be coincidence that, you know, his rent's just about the same amount.
All of the coincidences.
Right. Unluckiest man alive.
Yeah, literally.
That's how I feel about this case. So,
Oh my God, are you serious? Wait, whoa.
I mean, if that's a coincidence,
Then yeah, he
that's
would
very
be,
unlucky for him. Because
yes.
that's weird.
Yes.
If he just happened to
Literally
take his
everything.
members only jacket to get because it needed dry clean, and he just happened to do it the day after the murders when someone saw that a guy wearing that looked just like him
After he
wearing
said he was by
the same
himself.
jacket, and it just happens to be a coincidence that he took it dry cleaning. Very unlucky man.
Nar.
But we'll dive more into that in a little bit. So anyway, so they're like this. We don't go off coincidences. So what they do is they see on the ATM records that someone used the ATM 3.5 minutes after Katie's card was used. This woman, so they tracked down this woman to like see if she saw who used the card. This woman, who was referred to only as Miss Cook in the reports I read, she told police that she remembered seeing a tall blonde man leave the ATM and get into a small, light-colored car. She also identified Tim Hennis in a photo lineup.
Oh shit. Not looking good for you, bruv.
Now, on the other like spectrum of things, right now they don't have any physical evidence. They have all this circumstantial evidence
Nothing hard that will stick in court.
pointing at Tim Hennis. But they want physical evidence. And Biddle had recently heard about an exciting new science that Scotland Yard had been experimenting with at the time, called DNA.
Ooh,
so Biddle wrote a request to have them test Hennis's DNA against the semen sample found in Katie Eastburn. But
yes, Biddle.
Yeah, but Scotland Yard declined because they basically said the science was too new and too uncertain to be used in like criminal prosecution at the time.
Man.
So even without the DNA and without any of the physical evidence leading to Tim, because none of the blood was found at the scene was the same blood type. That blood on the towel I mentioned was not the same blood. They don't know this at the time. But they find out like sometime during the trial that like when the testing comes back, none of the hair found at the scene matches him. None of the fingerprints found at the scene matched him. And none of the blood was the same blood type.
Interesting.
So they still felt that they had enough circumstantial evidence to prove that this was Tim Hennis.
Yeah, this guy truly is the most unlucky guy in the world.
So trying to avoid a long and painful trial for the Eastburn, surviving family, the DA offers Hennis a plea bargain, which he immediately refuses, telling his lawyer, "I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do. Test the evidence. I did not do this. Test all the physical
he's like, well, maybe
evidence."
I lied about not cheating on my wife, but I didn't kill anybody.
Exactly. Cheating on because he went and saw the ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
So in 1986, lead prosecutor William Van Story prosecuted Hennis with all of his goddamn might, I will tell you. Not only did he present all the evidence that we just talked about, but he also presented some extremely gruesome crime scene photos of all three of the victims, including the two little girls. And he presented a lot of them, picture after picture after picture, for 90 minutes straight. "There's your baby killer," he exclaimed to the jury in his closing argument. He continued, "He's the one responsible for the deaths of these kids and their mother. The man responsible for taking their lives is sitting in the courtroom, breathing the same air as you are, and hopefully it won't be for much longer, because this is indeed a death row trial."
Oh, wow.
Now, the jury
He's heavy pointing that
deliberated.
finger.
The jury deliberated for only 10 hours before coming back with guilty verdicts on all 4 counts. At his sentencing hearing 3 days later, Tim Hennis was sentenced to death and sent to a prison in Raleigh. Now, soon after arriving at that prison, Hennis received a letter that said, "Dear Mr. Hennis, I did the crime. I murdered the Eastburns. Sorry you're doing the time. I'll be safely out of North Carolina when you read this. Thanks, Mr. X."
Oh my God.
Even Molly, can you hear Molly? Molly's like, no way. Yeah, Molly.
You don't fucking say.
Now,
Oh God.
the identity of Mr. X is still unknown to this day.
Oh my God.
A lot of people just think it was a hoax. So while Hennis and his lawyers were preparing to appeal his conviction, Gary was trying to piece his and Jana's life together. After the murders of Katie, Kara, and Erin, Gary had declined the liaison job in England because he wanted to be there at the trial every day. He wanted to make sure that justice was served. But now that the trial was over, he felt that he and Jana needed to move forward and try and get on with their lives. So the two finally made the move to the UK in 1988. Just a few months after taking the leap across the pond, Gary receives a call from Detective Biddle, and he had bad news. Hennis's lawyer had filed that appeal, and that appeal had made it all the way to the state Supreme Court. Now, according to the New Yorker article, the appeal claimed that the 90 minutes worth of gruesome crime scene photos that were shown to the jury had inflamed jurors against Hennis, and the judges ruled 5-2 in his favor, granting him a retrial. And that is where I think we're going to have to end it for today. And then we will start again at part 2 next week. No. I know. I thought this was going to be a one-parter, but I'm looking and it's already been over an hour. So
Womp womp.
womp womp. But, maybe since this is our first episode or one of the first episodes, maybe we'll just post them both at the same time, but it's going to be 2 parts. So.
I mean, it is a trial by podcast, so.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Trials aren't one day, guys. You got to come every day, you know. Okay. So we'll pick it up next week. Thanks for listening, Mom and Dad. It's been really good, the 4 of us spending time together.
Okay, bye.
Bye.